The fierce alien, Queen's daughter, vanished, only to be found, curled up with a human guard. The alarm cut through the night cycle like a blade. Every panel in the royal wing of the Vithara Palace blazed red. Guards hit the corridors running. Sensor arrays swept every chamber, every vent shaft, every subfloor cavity in the building. Queen Zael Mora stood at the center of the operations room with her arms locked behind her back, her 4 silver eyes burning with something that made every officer in the room keep their gaze on the floor. Her daughter was gone. Princess Lyra, 8 seasons old, the only heir to the Vitharan throne, had vanished from her sealed chamber between the 3rd and 4th Night Watch rotation. The chamber door had not opened. The window seals had not been broken. The monitor drones had recorded nothing. The child was simply gone, as if the room had swallowed her. The Queen did not raise her voice. That was the part that terrified everyone. She spoke in a low, flat tone to Commander Vess, her head of palace security. She told him that if her daughter was not found within 2 hours, she would hold him personally responsible for every second after that. Vess was a decorated soldier who had survived 3 interstellar campaigns. He nodded and left the room without a word, because there was nothing else a reasonable person could do when Queen Zael Mora spoke in that voice. The search began. Every Vitharan guard in the palace moved in formation. Drones swept the outer terraces. Sensor techs pinged the biometric grid for any trace of the princess's unique thermal signature. Nothing came back clean. The girl's signal had simply dropped off the map at 0217 hours and had not reappeared anywhere in the palace complex. Down in the lower east wing, in the section of the palace assigned to the human diplomatic security detail, a guard named Cole Avery sat at his post with a cold cup of tea and a datapad he was only pretending to read. Cole was 26 years old. He had been stationed at the Vitharan Palace for 7 months as part of the Earth-Vithara Joint Diplomatic Protection Agreement, a document that most humans back home had never heard of, and most Vitharans had never fully trusted. His job was to stand at the entrance of the human ambassador's suite from 2,000 hours to 0600 hours and make sure nothing happened that shouldn't. Nothing ever happened. The Vitharans considered the human guards decorative, necessary for the optics of the agreement, but not genuinely useful. They were shorter than Vitharan soldiers, slower in their reflexes, and limited to 2 eyes, which the Vitharans found both pitiable and mildly unsettling. Cole had heard a palace staffer describe the human detail as ceremonial furniture once. He had not argued the point. He heard the alarm go off at 0231 hours. He stood up, hand moving to his comm unit, scanning the corridor. The red light pulsed through the hallway. His earpiece crackled with fragmented Vitharan command chatter, most of which his translation unit caught only in pieces. Royal wing, missing. Sealed room, no trace. Cole moved to the door of the ambassador's suite and knocked twice. The ambassador, a career diplomat named Frank Okafor, opened the door in his robe looking alert despite the hour. Cole gave him the short version. Frank told him to lock the suite down and stay visible. Cole nodded, locked the door, and went back to his post. He stood in the red flashing corridor and listened to the search traffic on his earpiece. Then he heard something that was not in the traffic. Now it came from the storage alcove 3 meters to his left, a shallow utility recess behind a panel that held cleaning equipment and a rack of spare power cells for the corridor lighting. It was a sound so small, he almost missed it. A breath. The specific, ragged, uneven breath of a child who had been crying for a long time and had recently stopped because they were too tired to continue. Cole did not call it in. Not yet. He walked to the alcove panel, kept his movements slow, and pressed his palm to the release. The panel slid open. She was curled up on the floor behind the cleaning unit, knees pulled to her chest, her violet-tipped fingers wrapped around her own arms, her silver eyes wide open and fixed on him with an expression that was one loud noise away from full panic. She was wearing her sleep clothes. One small foot was bare. The other had a sock half falling off. Cole looked at her for a moment. She looked back at him. She did not run. She did not scream. She pressed herself slightly further into the corner, which was the most she could do, and she watched him with the eyes of a child who had been frightened badly and was waiting to find out if this new development was worse. Cole sat down on the floor cross-legged in front of the open panel. He did not reach in. He did not move toward her. He set his data pad down beside him, picked up his cold tea, took a sip, and made a face at how bad it tasted. The princess blinked. Cole looked sideways at her. "You okay?" he said in Vatharan, his accent terrible enough that the word for okay came out sounding like the Vatharan word for ceiling tile. She stared at him. He tried again, this time in English because his Vatharan was clearly not helping anything. "You're not hurt?" She did not understand the words, but she understood the tone, the slow, careful voice of someone who was not rushing at her, not grabbing, not filling the small space with noise and alarm. Her breathing steadied by a fraction. Cole reached into his jacket pocket and produced a protein bar. He set it on the floor halfway between himself and the open panel, well outside the alcove's edge, and pulled his hand back. She looked at it. She did not take it, but she uncurled her arms from around her knees, which was something. Now Cole sat with her in the flashing red light of the empty corridor, while the entire palace searched every room in the building and did not think to check the storage alcove outside the human guard post because nobody had thought the princess would go anywhere near the human section. He did not call it in for 4 more minutes. He sat on the floor and let her look at him and breathed evenly and waited until her breathing matched his before he reached for his comm unit, because he had younger siblings back in Ohio and he knew what a scared child needed before they needed anything else. When he finally opened the channel, he kept his voice flat and calm. "This is Avery at the East Lower Wing Post. I have the princess. She is safe. She is not injured. I need a calm response only. No alarms." The silence on the other end lasted 2 full seconds. Then the entire palace seemed to inhale. The first Vatharan to reach Cole's corridor was not a guard. It was Commander Vess, who covered the distance from the operations room in under 3 minutes, which for a Vatharan of his age was impressive. He arrived to find the human guard still sitting cross-legged on the floor in front of an open utility panel with a cold cup of tea beside him, and the princess of the Vatharan throne sitting inside the alcove, eating half a protein bar she had apparently decided was acceptable after all. Vess stopped in the corridor entrance. He had been in the Vatharan military for 31 years. He had managed evacuations, border crises, and 2 assassination attempts on the Queen. Nothing in that career had prepared him for the image of Princess Lyra, daughter of Queen Zaelmora, sitting in a cleaning supply closet voluntarily consuming human field rations while a 26-year-old foreign guard with bad Vatharan pronunciation sat on the floor watching the door. Cole looked up at Vess. "She is okay," he said carefully in Vatharan. "She is not hurt. She was scared. I think something frightened her in the main wing." Vess looked at the princess. The princess looked at Vess and then looked back at Cole and then took another bite of the protein bar in a way that was clearly a decision. Vess pressed his comm unit. "I need a medical team at East Lower Wing. Calm approach only. No visible weapons, no alarms." He paused. "And someone go tell the Queen we found her." He looked back at Cole. "What did you do?" he asked. Cole picked up his terrible tea. Nothing, he said. I just sat here. Vess studied him for a moment with the look of a man recalculating something he had already decided. The medical team arrived 2 minutes later. 2 veteran doctors who approached the alcove slowly and spoke softly and confirmed what Cole had already said. The princess was physically unharmed. She had a minor abrasion on one knee, consistent with a fall, probably from whatever route she had taken to get from the royal wing to the Lower East corridor, which remained unexplained because the palace sensors still showed no path. The princess allowed the doctors to check her knee. She did not allow them to take her out of the alcove. Not until Cole stood up, offered his hand, and said the one veteran phrase he was actually confident about, which was, "All good, and let's go." She looked at his hand. She looked at his face. She took his hand. The medical team exchanged a look that Cole did not see because he was already walking. Commander Vess fell into step beside him. He said nothing for 10 paces. Then, in a very quiet voice, "She has not voluntarily taken a stranger's hand in 2 years. Not since the incident." Cole did not ask what incident. He had been told enough times in his life that some things were not his information to have. "She was scared," he said. "Somebody sat with her. That is all." Vess looked at him sideways, then forward. "The Queen will want to speak with you." Cole felt his stomach do something complicated. Every story he had heard about Queen Zaelmora arranged itself quickly in the back of his mind. He had seen her once at a formal reception, standing at the head of a hall full of diplomats and military brass. And the memory was less a visual than a pressure, that the way a room changes temperature when something powerful enters it. "Yeah," he said. "I figured." They walked through the red-lit corridor toward the royal wing, the princess's small hand still in his, her bare foot making soft sounds on the floor, the half-eaten protein bar still in her other hand because she had not let go of it. The doors to the Queen's Operations Center were the kind of doors that made a statement. 12 feet tall, and sealed with biometric locks rated for military breach scenarios, flanked by 4 guards in full ceremonial armor who did not move when Cole and Vess approached with the princess. Then the princess looked up at the guards from behind Cole's arm, and the guards stepped aside. Inside, Queen Zaelmora stood with her back to the door, looking at the system map still lit with the search grid. Every officer in the room was statue still. The Queen's personal aide, a tall Vetharan woman named Sova, stood slightly behind and to the left of the Queen with the careful posture of someone who had learned through experience exactly how much space to maintain. Cole heard the princess make a small sound beside him. The Queen turned. Cole had been told she was intimidating. The word did not cover it. She was tall, nearly a foot taller than him, with the silver-white banded markings of the Vetheran ruling caste across her collarbone and forearms. Her 4 eyes were fully open, all silver, and they moved from her daughter to Cole, and back to her daughter in a single sweep that felt like being scanned. The princess let go of Cole's hand. She crossed the room and wrapped both arms around her mother's waist and pressed her face against the Queen's side and made a sound that was not crying exactly, but was close enough that it did not need a translation. The Queen's hand came down on the back of the child's head with a gentleness that did not match anything Cole had been told about her. Her fingers pressed into her daughter's hair and stayed there. Her eyes closed for exactly 2 seconds. Then they opened and found Cole. He was standing at the entrance of the operations center with Commander Vess, in his standard-issue human diplomatic guard uniform, holding a data pad and a mostly empty cup of cold tea, doing his best to look like someone who had not just spent 20 minutes sitting on a utility corridor floor. The Queen did not speak immediately. She looked at him the way someone looks at a sum that has come out to an unexpected number. not hostile, recalculating. Then she spoke in Vitharan. Sova translated without being asked. She wants to know what you gave her daughter. Cole held up the protein bar wrapper he still had in his jacket pocket. Peanut butter and oat bar, 12 grams of protein. I should probably confirm it is safe for Vitharan physiology. I did not think of that until just now. I apologize. Sova translated. One of the medical staff by the far wall immediately pulled up something on a tablet. After a moment, she gave a small nod. The Queen looked at the wrapper, then at Cole. Sova translated again. She wants to know why you did not call it in immediately when you found the princess. Cole thought about how to answer that. He thought about the alcove, the half-fallen sock, the breathing. Because she was scared, he said. And scared children need a minute before they need a rescue. Sova translated. The Queen was silent for 4 seconds. Every officer in the room appeared to be holding their breath. The Queen spoke. Sova translated. She says the human is either very wise or very lucky. Cole considered this. Probably the second one, he said. Something happened in the Queen's expression that was not quite a smile, but occupied the same general territory. She looked down at her daughter, who had not let go of her, and was watching Cole over her mother's arm with those wide silver eyes, still holding the protein bar wrapper. The Queen spoke again. Sova translated. She wants to know your name. Cole Avery, he said. East Lower Wing Post, Human Diplomatic Detail. The Queen repeated the name quietly, as if testing the shape of it. And she looked at Vess. Sova did not need to translate what followed, because Vess's expression said it clearly enough. Whatever Cole's status in the palace had been before tonight, it was something different now. Cole stood in the center of the operations room and felt the weight of that shift without fully understanding its size. He was 26 years old. He had been described as ceremonial furniture by a palace staffer 7 months ago. He had spent his night sitting on a cold floor because a child was scared, and he knew what scared children needed. He had not done it for any other reason. The princess peeled herself away from her mother's side and walked back across the room to Cole and held up the protein bar wrapper toward him with an expression that was a question. Cole looked at it, looked at her. You want another one? She did not understand the words. She understood the tone, the careful, some unhurried voice of someone who was not going anywhere. She nodded. Cole reached into his jacket pocket and produced a second bar, this one chocolate flavor, set it in her palm, and she turned and walked back to her mother with it, small and certain, barefoot and half sock and all. The operations room was very quiet. Commander Vess cleared his throat and said, in a low voice directed at Cole, I'm going to need a full incident report. Yes, sir, Cole said. And the name of whoever stocked your post with those bars. That would be me, sir. I ordered them from the human commissary. Vess looked at him. Order more. Outside the palace, the night cycle continued its slow rotation toward morning. The search drones were being recalled. The red alert panels were dimming back to standard blue. Somewhere in the eastern wing, a bay mystery remained. How a small girl had moved from a sealed royal chamber to a utility alcove in a section of the palace no one had thought to watch. Through sensors that had caught nothing, leaving no trace. No one had an answer yet. But the princess was safe, and the Queen's hands had stopped being locked behind her back. And Cole Avery was already composing his incident report in his head and trying to remember the Vetharan word for protein bar. He was fairly sure it translated to ceiling tile. He would look it up. The investigation into how Princess Lyra had moved through the palace undetected began the next morning and immediately ran into a wall of missing data. Not corrupted data, not deleted data. Missing data. Clean gaps in the sensor logs at exactly the timestamps that mattered, as though the system had simply chosen not to record during those minutes. The palace's head tech, an older Vitharan woman named Dara, pulled the raw files personally and spent 3 hours going through every layer of the grid before she came to Commander Vess with a look on her face that he had not seen from her in 15 years of working together. Someone with deep-level access cut the recording threads, she said. Not from outside, from inside the system. The authorization key that was used belongs to a clearance level only 6 people in this palace hold. Vess looked at the list of those 6 people for a long moment, and then he looked at the names again. 3 were senior palace administrators. 1 was his own second-in-command. 1 was the Queen's personal advisor. 1 was the Queen herself. The Queen did not do this, he said, which was not a question. Dara agreed. No, which means one of the other 5 gave someone below them the key or used it themselves. Vess folded the report. Keep this between us. No reports filed, no flags raised. And I need to know who before they know I'm looking. Down in the lower east wing, Cole was completing his overnight incident report at the small desk in the Human Details shared office when Ambassador Frank Okafor came in with 2 cups of coffee and the careful expression of a man who had been doing diplomacy for 20 years and recognized when something had shifted. Frank set a cup on Cole's desk and sat across from him. How are you holding up? Fine, Cole said. Tired. I got a briefing from the Vitharan liaison at 700. Frank turned the cup in his hands. They're describing what you did last night as a significant act. Not just finding her, the way you handled it. Cole kept his eyes on the report. I sat on a floor. In Vitharan diplomatic culture, Frank said, the way you sit matters as much as what you do. You made yourself smaller than the princess. You made no demands. You gave without asking for anything back. He paused. Or that is not nothing, Cole. That is actually a very specific thing to them. Cole looked up. I didn't know that. I know you didn't. Frank smiled slightly. That is probably why it worked. Cole thought about this. He thought about the alcove, the careful breathing, the protein bar on the floor between them. He had not been performing a diplomatic gesture. He had just been trying not to frighten a small child any further than she was already frightened. Is she okay? He asked. As the princess? Physically, yes. Emotionally, the palace doctors are saying she is stable, but they want to understand what frightened her enough to leave her chamber in the first place. Frank set down his coffee. She has not told anyone what she saw or heard before she ran. She is not speaking about it. That is her right, Cole said. Frank looked at him. Yes, he said. It is. 3 floors above them, in the royal private chambers, Princess Lyra was sitting at her study table with a data tablet she was not using and the chocolate protein bar wrapper she had not thrown away. Her attendant, a young Vitharan woman named Pela, sat nearby and tried to interest her in breakfast and morning lessons and conversation, all of which the princess accepted politely and engaged with minimally. Her silver eyes kept moving to the window. At 1100 hours, Commander Vess requested a private meeting with the Queen, and then he brought Dara's findings and laid them out without decoration. The Queen read the file. She set it down. She picked it up again and looked at the list of 6 names. You believe this was deliberate, she said. I believe someone wanted access to the princess that night, Vess said. Whether they succeeded before she ran, I cannot confirm. What I can confirm is that she reached the human section of the palace, which was not on the compromised sensor grid, because the human detail operates on a separate system we did not integrate when we agreed to the joint posting. The queen was very still. She ran to the only place in this building where someone could not track her. Yes. She did not know that. No. She could not have known. The queen stood and walked to the window. Outside, the city of Vethkalan spread in its silver tiers down toward the bay, the morning light catching the water in long, flat lines. She had ruled this world for 19 years. She had held the throne through 2 succession challenges, a trade war, and the death of her partner, and she had not bent once. She turned back to Vess. "Who in this palace wants my daughter?" she said, "and what do they want her for?" Vess had no answer yet. He told her so honestly, which was the only way to speak to her. "I need time. I need to move quietly. If I alert them that we know the sensor logs were cut, whoever did this will disappear the evidence." "How much time?" 3 days, possibly 4. The queen returned to her desk. "You have 2. She picked up the file. "And I want the human guard reassigned." Vess did not react to the phrasing. "Reassigned where?" "Here." She set the file down. "I want him posted on this floor. Personal detail for Lyra." Vess was quiet for a moment. "The Veteran Guard Association will object." "Let them." Her voice had that particular flatness again. "My daughter ran through this entire palace to find the one place she felt safe. I intend to bring that place to her." Vess left the room with the file and stood for a moment in the corridor outside the Queen's chamber, recalculating again. He pulled up Cole Avery's personnel record on his tablet. 7 months at the East Lower Wing Post. No incidents. Consistent performance reviews with the specific note, filed by 3 separate veteran officers over those 7 months, that the human guard was very quiet and did not cause problems. Vess had read that note each time and thought nothing of it. He read it now differently. He sent the reassignment order at 11:30 hours. Cole received it on his comm unit while still working on the incident report. He read it twice. He looked at Ambassador Frank, who was still in the shared office. "No, I've been reassigned," Cole said. Frank read the order over Cole's shoulder. He was quiet for a moment. "Do you understand what this means?" "I'm being put on the princess's personal detail." "You are being put on the princess's personal detail by direct order of Queen Zale Mora," Frank said slowly, "which means she personally initiated this. That is not a routine reassignment, Cole. That is a statement." Cole looked at the order on his comm. He thought about the Queen's face in the operations room. The 2 seconds her eyes had closed when the princess held her. The recalculating look she had given him after. "I just sat on a floor," he said again. Frank put a hand on his shoulder briefly. "Start sitting on a different floor." Cole reported to the Royal Wing at 1400 hours. The veteran guards at the corridor entrance checked his credentials with the specific thoroughness of people who were not happy about what they were being asked to accept. They cleared him through without a word. The Royal Wing corridor was different from the Lower East section. Wider, quieter. The walls held the specific kind of stillness that came from good soundproofing and centuries of architectural intent. Cole walked to the post point Vess had designated, took his position, and stood. From inside the princess's chamber, through the half-open door, he heard small sounds. A data tablet, movement, silence. Then the door opened wider, and Pela, the attendant, looked out at him with an expression that did not know what to make of him. Behind her, Cole could see the princess at her study table, not looking at the door. Then she looked at the door. Her 4 silver eyes found him. She held very still. Cole raised one hand. A small wave. Not formal. The way you would wave at someone you had sat on a floor with. The princess looked at him for a long moment. Then she went back to her data tablet. Pela retreated inside. The door stayed half open. Cole stood at his post in the royal wing corridor and breathed evenly, and watched the hallway, and felt, slowly, the particular quality of a shift that had no name yet, but that was already in motion, already changing the shape of something he could not fully see. In the palace's lower systems, the corrupted sensor logs sat untouched, waiting. Whoever had cut them had not moved again. Not yet. Cole had been on the princess's personal detail for 4 days when the second incident happened. He had fallen into a rhythm with the posting. Morning shift, 700 to 1500. Post at the corridor entrance. Controlled access from the check-in list Vess updated each night. He learned the faces of Lyra's regular attendants, her tutors, the medical staff. He learned the schedule of the wing. Lessons at 900, midday meal at 1200, rest period at 1330. Then the free afternoon the princess spent in the study room reading, building things out of a construction kit she kept in a wooden box under the table, or staring out the window for long stretches that worried Pela, but which Cole had come to understand were just thinking. She was a very thinking child. She had also, over those 4 days, made a study of him. It was not obvious. She did not approach him or speak to him. But when the door was open, which it was more often than not now, she would look up occasionally from whatever she was doing and check his position, the way you check that a familiar object is still where you left it. It was the look of someone running a background confirmation. He is still there. Good. Cole did not make a thing of it. He stood at his post, did his checks, logged his reports. He learned 3 new veteran phrases from a small language reference guide he kept in his jacket pocket. He got better at saying okay without it sounding like ceiling tile. On the 4th night, at 2300 hours, he was not on shift. He was in the human details shared quarters 2 floors down, awake in his bunk because the building's ventilation system made a sound at irregular intervals that he had never fully gotten used to, when his personal comm unit lit up. It was not a palace channel, when it was his direct unit, personal frequency. The message was text only, no sender ID, and it said, "They are going to move tonight. East Access Tunnel, below the East Garden. The girl is the target. You need to move now." Cole sat up. He looked at the message for 4 seconds. He thought about who had this frequency. He thought about the East Access Tunnel, which was a maintenance passage he had found on the palace schematics during his first week, running below the ornamental garden on the east side of the building and connecting to a vehicle bay 300 meters outside the main wall. He thought about the fact that whoever had sent this had not gone to Vess, had not gone to the Queen, had gone to him. He was out of his bunk and moving before he had finished thinking about why. He hit the corridor at a controlled run, not a sprint, because running in a palace at night attracted the wrong kind of attention, and he needed to reach the royal wing without triggering a general alarm that would tell whoever was moving tonight that they had been detected. He took the service stairwell. He avoided the main sensor corridors where his badge ping would be logged in real time. He arrived at the Royal Wing corridor entrance at 23:08 hours. The 2 veteran guards who were supposed to be at the entrance were gone, and the corridor was empty. Cole moved. He went straight to the princess's chamber, pressed his palm to the door panel, and pushed inside. The room was empty too. The bed was disturbed. The construction kit box had been knocked from under the table. One of the small wooden pieces was on the floor 3 feet from the table, which meant it had been knocked there with some force. Cole pressed his comm open. "Avery, Royal Wing, the princess is not in her chamber. The corridor guards are missing. And I need Vess now, East Access Tunnel." He did not wait for a response. He went. The service stairs to the subfloor took 40 seconds. The East Access Tunnel entrance was behind a maintenance door at the base of the east stairwell. A door that was not on the standard access manifest and was supposed to require a level 4 clearance key to open. It was open. The lights in the tunnel were off. Cole pulled the low-light torch from his jacket, even the small civilian-grade one he had been carrying for 7 months, because the human commissary had included it in his kit, and he had never seen a reason to remove it, and moved into the dark. The tunnel ran straight for 60 meters, and then bent left toward the vehicle bay. Cole moved fast and quiet, keeping the light low, listening. He heard them before he saw them. 2 sets of footsteps, one heavy and deliberate, one irregular and resistant. He came around the bend and put the torchlight on them. There were 2 figures. One was a veteran male in non-uniform dark clothing, tall, holding the princess by the arm, with a grip that was tight enough that she was pulling against it and losing. The other was a second figure standing 3 meters ahead, also veteran, watching the tunnel exit. The one holding the princess turned at the light, and Cole saw his face and recognized it from the clearance list. It was Ven Soral, the second in command of Palace Security, one of the 6 people with deep-level sensor access. Soral looked at Cole the way you look at a minor obstacle. "Human," he said. "Step aside." Cole shone the torch directly into his eyes and kept walking. Soral released the princess and reached for the weapon at his side. Cole had crossed 3 meters in the time it took Soral to reach for it, and he did not go for the weapon. He went for the arm, both hands, controlling the draw before it completed, no twisting with his full weight into Soral's elbow joint, in a direction that the joint was not designed to go. Soral made a sound and went down on one knee. Cole put him the rest of the way down and put his knee on the weapon hand and looked up at the second figure who had turned around. The second figure looked at Soral on the ground, looked at Cole, looked at the tunnel exit, ran for the exit. Cole did not chase. He had one hand on Soral and the other was already on his comm. "Avery, on East Access Tunnel exit, vehicle bay side, second suspect running. Veteran male, dark clothing, needs to be stopped. Do not let them reach a vehicle." He looked down at Soral, who was still and breathing, arm pinned. Then he looked at the princess. She was standing 2 meters away in her sleep clothes, the same ones she had been wearing the night he found her in the alcove. Her eyes were wide. Her hands were pressed together in front of her chest. She was breathing in the short, quick way of a child who was deciding whether to fall apart or not. Cole did not move from Soral's arm. He could not, but he kept his voice the same way he always kept it when she was near. Slow, low, unhurried. "All good," he said. In Vitharan, without the ceiling tile problem this time. "You are safe." She looked at him. Her breathing slowed by 1 fraction. He heard boots in the tunnel from the palace direction. Vess's people, finally coming. He heard shouting from the vehicle bay end. Someone had stopped the second suspect. He kept his knee on Soral's hand and his eyes on the princess and did not look away until Vess himself came around the corner with 6 guards and a torch that turned the tunnel bright. Vess stopped. He looked at Soral on the ground. He looked at Cole. He looked at the princess standing in the middle of the tunnel in her sleep clothes, holding herself together. He spoke into his comm. Seal the east vehicle bay. Detain everyone present. Medical to the east tunnel now. He looked at one of his guards. Escort the princess back to the royal wing. Direct route, 6-person formation, no delays. The guard moved toward the princess. The princess stepped sideways, away from the guard, toward Cole. Cole looked at Vess. Vess looked at the ceiling for a brief moment with the expression of a man who had stopped being surprised by this specific situation and had moved into simple management of it. "Avery," he said, "can you maintain control of the suspect while walking?" "Yes, sir," Cole said. "Then you escort the princess. My people will take Soral." Cole stood, keeping Soral's weapon arm controlled as 2 of Vess's guards took over, then straightened and moved to stand beside the princess. She did not take his hand this time. She walked beside him, 1 inch of space between them, small and upright and deliberate. And they walked the length of the tunnel and up the service stairs and through the palace corridors with 4 guards around them and another 2 ahead. And she did not make a sound the entire way. She was 8 years old, and she walked like someone who had already decided they were not going to let this be the thing that broke them. Cole kept pace with her and said nothing because nothing was needed. They arrived at the royal wing to find Queen Zaelmora already in the corridor. Someone had reached her faster than protocol required, probably Sova, because the queen was in her night robe rather than her formal wear. And that single detail made her look different in a way Cole had not expected. Not less powerful, more real. She crossed the corridor and went to her knees in front of her daughter and held her face in both hands and spoke to her quietly in Vatharan too fast and too low for Cole's translation unit to catch. The princess said something back. Short, certain. The queen looked up at Cole from her knees on the floor. Cole had been told she was intimidating. He had felt it himself in the operations room 3 nights ago. But this was different. This was the same look from the operations room with something added to it. Something that had no military name and no diplomatic category. She spoke. Sova was not there to translate. Cole's translation unit caught most of it. She says you have now twice put yourself between danger and her daughter. She wants to know what you want in return. Cole thought about this for a moment. He thought about Soral on the floor of the tunnel. He thought about the protein bar on the corridor floor 4 nights ago. He thought about a small girl walking upright through a dark tunnel and refusing to break. "Nothing," he said. "In Vatharan. Clear." The queen was still for a moment, and then she said one word Cole did not need a translation unit for because it was the same in every language he had ever studied. The word that meant, "I see you, and it is enough." She rose from her knees. She took her daughter's hand. They walked inside. Cole stood in the corridor while the guards took their positions and the wing went back to its careful, watched stillness. His shift did not start for 8 hours. He went back to his post anyway. 3 weeks after Ven Soral was taken into custody, the full scope of what he had been planning became clear, and it was larger than anyone in the palace had publicly acknowledged. Soral had not been acting alone. He was the operational arm of a faction within the Vatharan governmental structure that had grown in quiet opposition to Queen Zaelmora over the past 4 years. A faction that had decided the most efficient path to reshaping Vatharan policy was not a political challenge, but the removal of the direct line of succession. If Princess Lyra disappeared, if she was taken off-world to a location controlled by the faction's off-world partners, the Queen's position would fracture, succession would open, and the faction had already identified a candidate they believed they could manage. It was not. Vess explained to Cole in a private briefing on an unusual plan by historical Vatharan standards. "We have a word for it. Vess said. It translates roughly as the quiet restructuring. It has happened 7 times in our recorded history. Did it work those 7 times? Cole asked. 3 times yes, 4 times no. Vess looked at Cole steadily. This time, it was interrupted in a maintenance tunnel by a human guard with a civilian-grade torch. Cole did not respond to this. The faction's off-world partner has been identified, Vess continued. A Granith trading consortium that has been trying to negotiate resource rights in Vetharan space for 11 years without success. They provided the communication encryption and the transport vehicle. He paused. They were not expecting a human to be in that tunnel. Nobody was, Cole said. No. Vess folded the briefing file. There is a formal session tomorrow. The Queen will address the full council, and you have been requested to attend. Cole looked up. Why? Because the Queen requests it. Cole sat with that for a moment. He thought about what Frank had said weeks ago. Whatever his status in the palace had been before that first night, it was something different now. He had spent the last 3 weeks watching that something different take shape without fully being able to name it. The veteran guards in the royal wing had stopped looking at him like furniture. The palace staff who passed him in the corridor now gave a particular small nod that he had come to understand was a veteran gesture of peer acknowledgement. Even the Guard Association, which had formally objected to his posting in writing through official channels, had gone quiet. He was still 26 years old. He was still a foreign guard with bad veteran pronunciation, holding a civilian-grade torch and an excessive supply of protein bars. But the palace had reorganized itself around what he was, rather than what it had expected him to be. And that was something he was still learning to walk inside. I'll be there, he said. The formal session was held in the Grand Council chamber, a room that Cole had never entered. A space of considerable intentional gravity with tiered seating for 80 council members, a floor of polished stone, and light coming from apertures high in the ceiling that created specific angles designed, then he later learned, to make anyone standing at the center feel the full weight of the room's attention. Cole stood at the center of the room and felt this. Queen Zelmora addressed the council from the high platform at the room's head. She spoke for 20 minutes in formal Vetheran that Cole's translation unit caught at roughly 80% accuracy. She described the conspiracy. She named Soral and the 14 others who had been identified. She outlined the evidence and the legal process that would follow. She spoke about the off-world partners and the response Vethara would be sending through official diplomatic channels. Then she spoke about the human detail. Cole caught his name. He caught the phrase twice placed between danger and air, which was a formal Vetharan descriptor he had not heard before. He caught the phrase demonstrated judgment under conditions of no obligation. He caught the council going very still. The Queen spoke one more phrase. His translation unit gave him a best approximation. She is formally requesting that the Joint Diplomatic Protection Agreement be amended to include a provision for human personnel at the rank of Ward Companion, a rank without exact precedent in Vetheran security structure, carrying full palace access credentials and a direct reporting line to the Queen's office. The council murmured. Cole stood at the center of the room, under the ceiling light, and breathed evenly and waited. The vote was not unanimous. 7 council members abstained and 2 voted no, which Vess told him afterward was actually a remarkably small opposition given the precedent being set. The motion passed. The amendment would be drafted. It would take 3 months to formalize. In the meantime, Cole's posting on the royal wing remained unchanged. After the session, as the council chamber cleared and Cole was preparing to leave, he heard a small sound to his left. He turned. Princess Lyra was standing beside a column at the edge of the chamber floor, still in her formal session clothes, which were several layers of structured Vetheran court fabric that she clearly found uncomfortable because she had already pulled one of the collar fastenings loose. She was holding a folded piece of paper. Cole looked at it. "For me?" She held it out. He took it and unfolded it. Inside, in the careful, deliberate marks of a child who had been working at something, a drawing. 2 figures, one small, one larger. They were standing in what was clearly a tunnel, indicated by lines on either side, and the larger figure had a circle in one hand that Cole eventually identified by the rays drawn around it as a torch. Underneath, in Vetheran script that was slightly uneven but readable, were 3 words. His translation unit gave him, "You stayed. Thank you." Cole looked at the drawing for a moment. He looked at the princess, who was watching him with the measuring, steady gaze she had been watching him with for 3 weeks. He folded the drawing carefully and put it in his jacket pocket, next to the language guide and the protein bars and the civilian-grade torch he still carried because the commissary had included it, and he had never found a reason to put it down. "You stayed too," he said, in Vetheran correctly, but without the ceiling tile. She looked at him. Something moved in those silver eyes that was not quite a smile, but was close enough. She turned and walked back to her attendant and her mother's side, small and certain, and did not look back, because she did not need to. She knew he was still there. Outside the palace, the morning light was coming in long, flat lines off the bay. The city of Veth Kalan moved in its tiers below, silver and unhurried, on carrying the specific weight of a place that had seen many things and expected to see many more. Cole Avery walked back to his post in the royal wing and stood there and watched the corridor and breathed evenly and felt, somewhere in the place behind his sternum where things land before you have words for them, the particular, quiet weight of being somewhere that had decided you belonged, not because of rank, not because of a formal council vote or a diplomatic amendment 3 months from being finalized, because a small girl had drawn a tunnel and 2 figures and written 3 words in uneven script. And that was a thing no protocol had built and no policy had anticipated, and no one, least of all Cole Avery from Ohio with his bad Vetheran and his protein bars and his ceiling tile vocabulary, had planned for. The corridor was quiet. The morning moved. The palace held its breath in the particular way of places where something has just changed and is only now beginning to understand its own new shape. Cole stood at his post. He stayed.